go.
It's light work, period.
Light work.
Desmond Walker.
Joshua Primo.
Herbert Jones.
Roll Tide and welcome to Tide TV This Week. I'm Roger Hoover, joined by Kira Goldstein. Kira, we've been waiting for the season opener. We got an impressive debut for the Crimson Tide on Saturday.
Yeah, a dominant win in Atlanta. Alabama is 1-0. Let's take a look at the highlights. Alabama took control of the game from the very start, and the Tide never let up. Bryce Young completed his opening drive as the Alabama starting quarterback with a 37-yard touchdown pass to John Mechie. The Crimson Tide scored 27 consecutive points to open the game, and tight end Cameron Latu was responsible for 2 of those scores as he had touchdown grabs of 9 and 25 yards in the first half. Those 2 touchdown receptions for Latu were also the first touchdowns of his career, a big game for the redshirt junior tight end.
The Alabama defense was impressive as well, forcing 4 punts and a fumble on Miami's first 5 offensive possessions. On Miami's first possession of the second half, with Alabama up 27-3, the Tide held the Hurricanes on 4th and goal at the 1-yard line, a big stop for the Crimson Tide D. 3 plays later, it was the Alabama offense really making them pay even from deep in the end zone. Bryce Young to Jameson Williams, 94 yards for the score. Wow, what a play, what speed from Williams, the transfer from Ohio State. He made his presence known in his first game for the Crimson Tide. That made it 34-3.
The Alabama defense also added a couple of interceptions. On Miami's next possession after being stopped on 4th and goal, Malachi Moore intercepted Derek King's pass at the 34-yard line. In the 4th then, after a tip from Daniel Wright, Jalen Moody jumps in, intercepted the second pass for the Crimson Tide defense on the day. And then over on special teams, Willie Reichard remained perfect. Reichard kicked a 51-yard field goal in the second quarter, the second longest of his career, Roger, and connected on a 40-yarder in the 4th as well as the #1 ranked Crimson Tide dominated the 14th ranked Hurricanes in Atlanta 44-13.
I thought Bryce played really well for his first start. Mechie was really good. Williams was really good. I got to play a lot of players. The defense competed well in the game. I had a couple stops in the red zone, which just was a sign of how they competed in the game. Got to give a lot of credit to Miami. I had a lot of respect for their players and their quarterback. They got really good skilled players on offense. So I was really excited. I'm sure that when we watch the film, we'll see a lot of things. There were way too many penalties. There's a lot of things that we could go through that we'd like to get better, but those things happened more in the second half when the game got a little bit sloppy for us, and so we'll work on trying to correct those things.
Alabama outgained Miami 501 yards to 266. The Tide finished with 354 yards passing with 147 on the ground. Bryce Young led the Crimson Tide in his starting debut, completing 27 of 38 passes for 344 yards and 4 touchdowns. His longest pass was a 94-yard strike to wideout Jameson Williams, who made his debut in the Crimson and White. Williams finished with a game-high 126 yards receiving to go along with his touchdown catch. John Mechie III led the Tide in receptions with 6 on the ground, and also Brian Robinson on the ground led Alabama with 12 carries for 64 yards for an average of 5 yards per carry.
On the defensive side, the Tide created 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions, and also a fumble. Malachi Moore and Jalen Moody had the picks, and Chris Allen forced the fumble that was recovered by Fedarian Mathis. Will Anderson Jr. led the Crimson Tide with 9 tackles, and Christian Harris had 2 tackles for loss, and the defense sacked Miami quarterback Derek King 4 times in the game. Wow. And for his record-setting performance, Bryce Young won a couple of awards. Young was named the Southeastern Conference Offensive Player of the Week as he completed 27 of 38 passes for 344 yards. 4 touchdowns and no interceptions as well. Young's 344 yards and 4 touchdowns were both Alabama records for the most in a quarterback's starting debut. Young was also named the Davey O'Brien National Quarterback of the Week. Along with 2 records, Young broke his 94-yard touchdown pass to Jameson Williams is the second longest, in Crimson Tide history. A very impressive week for him.
Absolutely, and after not missing a field goal or an extra point all of last season, Will Reichard remained perfect against Miami. Reichard was good in all 3 field goal attempts from 38, 40, and 51 yards. He also connected on all 5 extra point attempts. Reichard also kicked off 7 times, forcing touchbacks on all 7 kicks, earning him SEC Special Teams Player of the Week.
And those were the Tide's SEC and National Players of the Week. But Roger, also each week, Coach Saban and the coaching staff select their own Players of the Week.
This week, Coach Saban and the staff honored 7 players with 4 on offense, 2 on defense, and also 1 on special teams. Darian Dalcourt was chosen in his first start at center for the Crimson Tide. Also, tight end Cameron Latu recorded his first career reception and touchdown in the game. Latu finished with 3 receptions for 43 yards and 2 touchdowns. John Mechie led the team with 6 receptions as he also totaled 76 receiving yards and a 37-yard touchdown for the first score of the game and season. Also, quarterback Bryce Young set Alabama records with 344 yards passing and 4 touchdowns in his starting debut.
On defense, Will Anderson Jr. had a team-high 9 tackles, including 2 solo stops. Anderson also added a sack for a loss of 4 yards. Defensive back Jalen Amore Davis tied for second on the team with 2 solo tackles, and kicker Will Reichard connected on all 3 of his field goals as he was perfect on extra points as well, converting all 5 attempts. Reichard's 51-yard field goal in the second quarter is the second longest in his career, and what an opening for the Crimson Tide, Roger. Very dominant.
Absolutely. A great start for the Crimson Tide. Stay with us. When we come back, we'll go all access with the #1 ranked Crimson Tide as they dominated number 14 Miami in Atlanta.
TideTV This Week is presented by the University of Alabama, where legends are made. Ford, for great offers on F-150, see your local Ford dealer. Proud sponsor of the Crimson Tide.
Welcome back to Tide TV This Week. 44-13 for #1 Miami over 14th ranked Miami in the Chick-fil-A Kickoff Classic in Atlanta. Not a bad way to start the season for the reigning national champions.
Yeah, a very impressive performance from the Crimson Tide. So let's take an all-access look back with the Tide for that impressive season opening win in Atlanta.
Hey, Fury, playing like I don't really do this, bro. What they talking about? I'm a monster. Knew I had it in me. I was a toddler. When I was a youngin', man, I probably robbed you. I was in school breaking in they locked me. Watching my friends die made me harder. I don't care about none but making dollars.
Young had to step up away from the rush. Wide open receiver. It's John Mechie lunging for the pylon. It's a touchdown if it stands.
I'm a monster. I would never lose, and it ain't no that can stop it. I'm a monster. Only trick on the if the worth up the profit. I'm a monster. Want some 20/20 clear vision. That is still gripping. Got it on me right now, I ain't slipping. My hold it in her purse, cause she really with it. Strike on the dice, then go fuck up the mall. Lately been feeling like fuck 'em all. I cannot speak on some things that I saw. Ain't been the same since I lost my dogs. I swear I'm scarred. But for them we gon' ball.
Play fake by Young. Wide open, it's a touchdown. Cameron Latu, the touchdown. Alabama picking right up where it left off last year. Look out! He got hit by Chris Allen. The ball popped out, and Phil Mathis has it for the tie.
Probably robbed you. I was in school breaking in they locked me. Watching my friends die made me harder. I don't care about none but making dollars. Smoking on good gas, popping bottles. My mama praying for me cause I'm heartless. I'm a monster. If you want smoke, then it's up there like Vince Carter. I'm a monster. MGM just hit him for 5 racks off $50. I'm a monster. I would never lose, and it ain't no
Young first down. Latu didn't have a catch for his career. Has 2 touchdowns. 25 yards for Cameron Latu.
My thumb trying to load the 30. Use a towel so they clean if I do them dirty. What? Tell me who bigger. I stand by myself. You need 10. I ride through any city and any state. Sliding through the hood, passing out my mixtape.
King to the goal line, and he did not get in. Young back in the end zone again on 3rd and 5. That question might have to wait because there goes Jamison Williams to the house. Touchdown, Alabama.
I was in school breaking in they lock.
Throws, balls tipped in the air. Tipped the second time. It'll be Malachi Moore with the interception.
Sanders again. Trey Sanders again. Touchdown again.
MGM just hit him for 5.
There's a pass over the middle, ricocheted, intercepted. Jalen Moody has it for Alabama. Jalen Moody, the interception.
Tide TV This Week is presented by the University of Alabama, where legends are made. Ford, for great offers on F-150, see your local Ford dealer. Proud sponsor of the Crimson Tide.
Welcome back to Tide TV This Week. I'm Kira Goldstein, joined by my co-host Roger Huber.
Kara, we just took an all-access look at Alabama's win over Miami in Atlanta. Now it's time to turn our focus and attention to Alabama's matchup against Mercer.
And for a preview of this weekend's matchup between the Tide and the Bears, our Christopher England joins us now.
After a big opening weekend in Atlanta, the Crimson Tide return home to Bryant-Denny this Saturday for their home opener. Number 1 Alabama will take on 1-0 Mercer. To preview the matchup between the Tide and Bears, I'm joined now by former Alabama and NFL quarterback John Parker Wilson. JP, it's great to see you.
Man, it's good to be back. Another football season. It's good to be here.
Man, it's exciting. You know, last weekend it was more the same from the Crimson Tide in those kickoff classics. The Tide dominated the Miami Hurricanes 44-13. JP, there were a lot of questions about the Alabama offense going into the season, but it looks like they were answered with new coaches, new starters, and more of the same results.
Yeah, you're exactly right. A lot of unknowns coming in this season with new quarterback, 3 new offensive linemen, and many new faces to the skill position. But I think they played great. I think they've executed really well on both sides of the ball. And I think Bryce Young and his debut at Alabama going out and doing what he did was impressive to see. But also I love just his confidence, how collected he was, how he's out there leading the team. And you could just tell that they had really put in the preparation all offseason, and it showed out on Saturday.
Well, JP, there's always talk about how those mobile quarterbacks are the kryptonite for this Alabama defense, but that Alabama D held the Canes to just 1 touchdown and finished with 3 turnovers, 4 sacks, and 7 tackles for loss. I would say a very dominant performance by the Alabama defense.
No question. They look really good on the defensive side of the ball. And I think our athletic ability that we have, along with the experience that we go into the season with this year, as opposed to last year, where a lot of guys were unproven. They took that experience and really showed out on Saturday. I think not a lot of misplays at all on defense, in the right spot, really good tackling. I think they played with a lot of intensity. You can tell they were ready to go for that first game. Coach Saban does a really good job of getting them prepared. Obviously, he hasn't lost one of these openers since he's been at Alabama. So, picking up right where they left off last year. Slow start to the season in 2020, but really finished. They led the SEC in scoring at the end of the year. So really just continued to improve on what they built last year.
As you said, Alabama's undefeated in those kickoff classics, and they're also 3-0 all-time against Mercer. The Bears have never scored against the Crimson Tide. Now, 2 of those wins were 20-0 wins way back in 1939 and 1940, but the most recent one, a 56-0 victory in 2017. Now, Mercer last week scored 69 points in their season opener against Point University, but what was more impressive was their 778 yards of total offense. 539 of those were on the ground. You know, Mercer runs a different style of offense than Alabama is accustomed to seeing, but they obviously did some things right last week. But of course, Mercer will have some tougher competition this week.
No question. Mercer coming into Tuscaloosa with some serious momentum. I mean, putting up as many points as they did last week. Different, wing tee, wishbone style of offense. We've seen Alabama defense struggle with those in the past. Early in the games, I think they get adapt to it, and it's just something that these guys don't ever practice, don't ever prepare for. Probably spent maybe a few periods during camp getting ready for this game because it is so unique. But just really requires a different level of focus when you go in here and facing an offense that you really, probably a lot of these guys never saw it in high school either. So it's just coming out and executing. That's the thing about going against a triple option type of offense is you got to execute, and you can't get bored with just doing the right thing, play after play after play. You have to stick with your assignments, and that's what it's going to be about on Saturday.
Well, John Parker, the Alabama defense looked good on Saturday. I'm looking forward to seeing how they face up against this Mercer different type of offense that they'll have. But it will be good to be back in Bryant-Denny on Saturday. I know you're excited and you're looking forward to it.
Can't wait. Always the home opener is so fun. You get out there So much work has gone in from these guys and coaches and staff and everybody else throughout the entire off season. So now you get a chance to get up there in front of your classmates and your fans. It's gonna be a fun day.
Well, thank you for the insight, JP. As always, it's great to see you.
Thank you, bud. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Kickoff is scheduled for 3 o'clock on the SEC Network. You can listen to John Parker Wilson, Eli Gold, and the rest of the Crimson Tide Sports Network crew online and on the radio beginning at noon. Stay with us. We'll have more Tide TV this week coming up next.
In a season of chaos,
you can tell they authentically play for each other.
Alabama does it. Absolute perfection.
How good can the Crimson Tide be again in 21?
It just doesn't show any sign of slowing down.
It's all about the process.
it's more than a buzz at Bryant-Denny.
This guy's not going anywhere. He doesn't just roll out great players. He and his staff develop them.
Bama's dominance shouldn't scare you. It should energize you.
Welcome back to Tide TV this week. The Alabama volleyball team held their season opener at home this past weekend as Alabama hosted the Crimson Tide Invitational.
The Tide hosted Troy, Buffalo, and Southern Miss as Alabama played each of those teams beginning on Thursday. After a tough 3-1 loss to Troy in the opener, Alabama bounced back with a couple of wins in dramatic fashion.
Alabama used a season best 11 aces and a season high hitting percentage of .309 to sweep Buffalo in 3 sets. After trailing 9-3 in the opening frame, the Tide used 10 consecutive points to come back and win the opener 25-18. Alabama then dominated in the final 2 sets with wins of 25-14 and 25-13.
After the sweep against Buffalo on Friday, Saturday's contest against the Southern Miss Golden Eagles would wind up being a little more dramatic. Alabama dropped the first 2 sets, but battled back to even it at 2-all with a 25-14 win in the third and a 25-19 victory in set 4. That pushed it to a winner-take-all 5th set. Kennedy McElroy came through with the kill to make it 16-14 Bama, giving the Crimson Tide the dramatic 3-2 victory. Sammy Jacobs was named the tournament MVP, finishing the weekend with a team-leading 36 kills, including a 22-kill performance in the win over Southern Miss.
And Drew Cook was named to the Crimson Tide Invitational All-Tournament team. Cook was also named the SEC Defensive Player of the Week for the 2nd week in a row. Cook led the team with 60 digs over 12 sets of play for an average of 5%.
Congratulations to Cook and Jacobs on their big weekend. The volleyball squad will head to San Marcos, Texas this weekend for the Bobcat Invitational as Alabama will take on Texas State and Miami in the tournament.
The Alabama cross-country team had a great season last year, breaking several school records, and the Tide look to capitalize on that and keep improving as they begin the season. For more on the Crimson Tide cross-country team, our Sierra Lynn joins us now. Sierra?
After finishing 2nd at the SEC Championships and 8th at the NCAA Championships, the Alabama women's cross-country team enters the season ranked #1 in the South region and 7th in the nation, while the men are ranked 4th in the South. Mercy Schellingott won both the SEC and NCAA individual championships. She returns along with 15 others on the women's side, with 10 returning for the men. Sophomore Maris Tenisma and senior Paul Selden say they are excited about the potential for this year's team.
Last year was a testament of how well we could adapt to COVID and the challenges, and I think that we're phenomenal at rolling with the punches and adapting, and that's one of our secret talents.
A big takeaway from last season was it was a crazy year. We had a lot of young guys and there was a big learning curve, but ultimately one of the big takeaways is relying on each other to push ourselves closer to our goals, and by the end of the year we really got good at that. We actually just sat down, the whole team, had some dinner last Saturday and set some really definite goals about what we want to do as a team on the course and outside the course, and how we want to propel ourselves into the future.
This season, we have some pretty hefty goals. We would love to win SECs, perform really well at regionals, and then make it to nationals. And what would be really cool is if both the men and the women's team made it to nationals, because that's never been done before.
The Tide traveled to Tennessee for the Memphis Twilight this past weekend, and their next race is set for September 17th at the North Alabama Showcase in Huntsville. Don't go anywhere. We'll have more Tide TV this week coming up next.
In a season of chaos,
You can tell they authentically play for each other.
Alabama does it. Absolute perfection.
How good can the Crimson Tide be again in 21?
It just doesn't show any sign of slowing down.
It's all about the process.
It's more than a buzz at Bryant-Denny.
This guy's not going anywhere.
He doesn't just roll out great players. He and his staff develop them.
Bama's dominance shouldn't scare you. It should energize you.
Oh, it's perfect from Malia Moore. An ace to sweep Buffalo. McElroy. And Alabama completes the comeback.
Here's Bryce standing in, has protection, sees running room, steps up, throws wide open, reaching inside the 10, touchdown. Can Bama make a big defensive stop? They do! Bryce gets it, backpedals onto the end zone, loads up, looks long. He's got Williams behind the defense. Jamison makes the grab at midfield. Touchdown, Alabama!
And this week, we'll start with a couple of outstanding performances from volleyball. Drew Cook earned a spot on the Crimson Tide Invitational All-Tournament team after recording 60 digs over the 3 matches in the event. Cook closed out the tournament with a weekend best 26 digs in the 5-set thriller over Southern Miss. Cook was also named the SEC Defensive Player of the Week for the 2nd week in a row.
Sammy Jacobs finished the Crimson Tide Invitational with a team-leading 36 kills, including a 22-kill performance in the comeback win over Southern Miss. For her performance, Jacobs earned tournament MVP honors.
And quarterback Bryce Young was spectacular in his starting debut. Young completed 27 of his 38 pass attempts as he finished with 344 yards and 4 touchdowns. Young's 344 yards and 4 touchdown passes are the most in Crimson Tide history for a starting quarterback in his debut.
Wow, a big congratulations to Drew Cook, Sammy Jacobs, and Bryce Young. They are our Legacy of Hope Players of the Week. Another incredible week for the Crimson Tide, Roger.
Certainly was, and now Alabama gets Mercer. Great to have the home opening coming up this week, and make sure you tune in next week as we'll bring you more on the Crimson Tide, plus the all-access content of the Alabama that you can't get anywhere else. We'll see you next week, everybody. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.